So we pretty much agreed that children have a great deal of fluidity. They're open to a lot of ideas, um, and and that they were um, flexible, that they rejected what they did not feel was right for them. Barbara mentioned her grandchildren or granddaughter who went to a Catholic school where, they were fed a lot of dogma. And she told Barbara that she just said, what they wanted her to hear, but privately didn't believe any of it. So, she chose what was right for her. Um, I questioned, where does that end? At what time does that childhood end? Because so many kids, you can hear it on playgrounds, and I realize I know different kids, but where does that stop? And they're parroting back what they hear from their parents, and this is right because that's what my dad said, and you're obviously wrong even though that's what your dad said, that kind of thing. So where does that go in? Joe mentioned that kids tend to be, kind of happy-go-lucky, but again, where where does that fluidity end? I kind of wonder. But there was a lot of, when they are fresh, they are so open to everything that's out there and take it all in.
Neat. Yeah, it sounds like similar to what we were talking about. Anybody else have something they'd like to bring in and share? Anybody? Yeah, Revi? Yeah, great.
Well, they live in the present. And Jan said something that we really liked. And that was if you're reading a book about a bird and it doesn't seem like the bird, let go of the book and just be involved with the bird, the real thing, or something like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's the idea of it. And that they don't have the rigid thinking. They
Mhm.
haven't learned all of the dogma and all the things that they should do, so that they don't overthink things and analyze things and do what somebody else thinks they should do.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Very good. Jan, would you mind reading us that quote? Because it's so cool. I think everybody would benefit from hearing it.
If I can remember it, I believe it says, if what is written in a book about a bird is different from what the bird says, believe the bird.
Love it. Love it. Okay.
I'm curious to hear what Karen's group thought, because she works with a very fresher bunch of kids than many of us.
Yeah. Karen, do you mind sharing?
Sure. Well, we had a great discussion, and it did cover quite a range of ages, because Heather brought in, the older um, youth as well. But overall, our group talked about how easily they question and just don't accept things as truth, which causes us to look at our own beliefs. So I think that was the overall theme in our discussion, that being open to those questions that our youth are bringing forth is really beneficial to us.
Mm. Yeah, I agree heartily. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, that was fun. Well, let's sing our post greetings song, which is God You Are. Let's rise in our consciousness and sing this wonderful song. Oh, thank you, Spirit, for reminding me. Today, when we sing God You Are every mountain, God You Are every ocean, would everybody please, for every single one of these lines, look at somebody here? So when I sing God You Are every mountain, I'm going to look at Jan. It's like I'm saying, Jan, you are every mountain. Heather, you are every ocean. You understand? You get it? So let's really sing it to each other. I know you're going to have to kind of cheat, look at the words and look at each other, but let's try that and see what happens as we sing God You Are. everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. 'Cause you are the very breath I breathe. And your perfect love created me. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. Oh, and it is true. Whoops. Sorry, I took my eyes off the music. Isn't that true? God, we are every single mountain. Thank you so much. Hey, let's say our vision and mission statement. We haven't said that yet. Be kind of fun to say it right now. So let's say it. Centered in God, we co-create a world that works for all, healing our world through prayerful living, inspired teaching, and helping others. And why don't we say our prayer for unity in the foothills? Why not? We give thanks that God within us and through our consciousness is forming our beloved spiritual community as a place of love, light, and peace for all. That felt good. Well, now let's sing another song. Let's sing Inside to Find My God. This is a beautiful one by Daniel Nahmod. We love this song. Please join me in singing Inside to Find My God. Well, thanks everybody. You sang that so beautifully. Heather, I could hear you. Wasn't that nice? Yep. And so we're very blessed to have our Lisa bring in our scripture reading today. And as she comes forward with this, do give her your love and your light. Thank you, Lisa.
Good morning, all. Our scripture reading is from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 2, verses 23 to 28. One Sabbath, he was going through the cornfields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? He entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and he gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Our second reading is a quote belonging to Ursula K. Le Guin. The imagination is truly the enemy of bigotry and dogma.
Thank you, Lisa. You read that so beautifully. I want to tell you about my brother Steve's dog. Her name is Farah. She is absolutely beautiful. She's a lovely girl. And most of the time, she has the sweetest disposition. Butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. But when it comes to being taken on a walk, little Miss Farah has some very fixed ideas about where she will and where she will not walk. So every Christmas, when Andy and I go up to visit my brother Steve at his home in Exeter, we always volunteer to walk Farah because every year we think it's going to be different, but every year it's the same. Farah will only walk to the right, never to the left. Mind you, all the pretty parts of Exeter are to the left. That's where the pretty houses are. That's where Exeter Academy is. That's where the river is. Never mind all that. It's always to the right. She always wants to go there. We coax, we beg, but she only turns to the right. It's confounding every single time. Because when we look to the right, what we see is a really desolate view. It's like an empty wasteland there. There's abandoned schools. There's an old forgotten cemetery. It's depressing. But that's the view that Farah insists upon. So, I have a dog too. Only I call my dog my Dogma. And it can be stubborn, just like Farah. It can insist upon a point of view that isn't particularly pleasant. And while it's true that my dogma allows me to go to the left when I want to go on a walk, I have other dogmas that are, pretty entrenched. And I'm wondering if maybe you do too. For instance, maybe you've noticed this about me. I have a dogma about hard work. I have a belief that I'm not worthy of love unless I work really hard. Like, unless I exhaust myself. That's my belief. And I know it's silly. And I really try to take this belief for a walk in my intellect. I reason with myself. I make affirmations. I remind myself of spiritual principle. But no matter how much I coax or implore, that dogma doesn't turn around. It's only when I remember to shift from reasoning intellect to my caring heart, when I remember, oh my gosh, I really do love you, Carolyn. I do care about you. That's when I can take that dogma for a walk. And instead of that dogma walking me, taking me on a walk on the streets of needless suffering, I can finally walk my dogma. I can walk it. I can walk it in green pastures. I can walk it beside still waters. I can walk it and remind myself that if I rest, I'm just as deserving of love as when I work. So I thought it'd be fun to look at what exactly is dogma. So if you look in lots of different dictionaries, you'll see lots of different definitions. Merriam-Webster's dictionary has 3 that I pulled out. One is something held as an established opinion. Ooh, that's interesting. 2 is a point of view or a tenet put forth as authoritative without adequate grounds. 3 is a doctrine or a body of doctrines concerning faith or morals formally stated and authoritatively proclaimed by a church. Okay. Now, the Cambridge Dictionary defines dogma as a fixed, especially religious belief or set of beliefs that people are expected to accept without any doubts. And the Oxford Dictionary defines it as a principle or a set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true. So there's all that. But then I stumbled into what I thought was the most interesting definition of dogma. It's the literal meaning of the original word as found in the ancient Greek. And that definition of dogma is something that seems to be true. Wow, I see some of you smiling. Some of you are getting that. Isn't that interesting? How that word dogma started out with the idea of perception, something that seems to be true. And then over time, the word dogma calcified and hardened, and it became, there's no other word for it, it became dogmatic, right? So I'll never forget when I heard about the dogma of never wearing black and blue together. I don't know if any of you have heard of that dogma. Well, here's what happened. I was walking through the quad of the drama department where I went to college, and I came upon one of the stars of our class, a beautiful, gorgeous, gorgeous young woman, extremely talented. And there she was, just fit to be tied, in hysterics, crying. And so naturally I went and I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I have nothing to wear for my audition and it's scheduled in 30 minutes. And I looked at her and I thought, she looks stunning. And I said to her, "What's wrong with what you have on?" And she looked at me as if I had just landed on planet Earth. And she said, "It's black and blue. You never wear black and blue together." So here I am wearing black and blue. Yikes, what's going to happen to me? So far, I have not been struck by lightning, and I've been sitting with you for 45 minutes, not been struck yet, wearing black and blue. So, if you belong to a cult that believes that cupcake consumption is the only true path, well, then you're going to follow the cupcake dogma. And that dogma, once adopted, you're going to accept that without question. You're going to go eat cupcakes. Lucky you. If, however, you belong to a cult that believes that black and blue are colors that shall never be combined, well, then you could very well end up crying needlessly in some lonely corner of the school of life. Now, we know that some folks belong to the cult that believes that war is the only path. Have you watched the news lately? It doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to follow a path simply because dogma pulls us that way. Something that seems to be true isn't necessarily true. If we really desire, if we really want to move in a new direction, we are empowered by the Christ we are to do so. Our young people just told us that. We can take charge of our dogma. We can leash it to the love that we are. We can take our dogma for a walk and expose it to what is always infinitely possible. I just love this story from Mark's gospel about the path that our way shower, Yeshua, took on a Sabbath day thousands and thousands of years ago. Now, we all know this. It bears worth repeating that the rule, the dogma surrounding the Sabbath, was that there was to be no work done on that day. And harvesting was considered to be work, even if you were just taking a couple grains. Oh, that's harvesting. Everybody, man, woman, child, and all the animals too, everybody had to take a day off and rest. Now, It's a rule that started out of a desire to balance the many, many years the Hebrew people were slaves in Egypt and never had a day off. So it's not a bad idea. You know, it's a good way to make sure that everyone, including the animals, gets a break. But the rule became dogmatic when it could no longer be questioned. Because what if you are starving? What if you're really, really hungry and you see that, oh my gosh, here's food. Here's food at hand. Are you not allowed to harvest it and eat it? Or are you enslaved to a rule that would starve you? The Pharisees couldn't see that they'd been enslaved themselves by dogma. And for that reason, because they couldn't see that they were enslaved by dogma, they were attempting to enslave others, to starve others, actually. But our way shower was no slave. He was boldly and audaciously free. He was free to feed himself truth when dogma would starve him of loving compassion. And this bold freedom eventually enabled him to feed 5,000 hungry people, lovingly, compassionately, with 12 baskets left over. That's the freedom of absolute love. Because in absolute love, there's no room for dogma. I think to the ears of the Pharisees, that statement of Yeshua's, the Sabbath was made for humankind and not humankind for the Sabbath, so the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Wow. If you get in their headset, that must have just sounded blasphemous. The dogma of their time insisted that the dogma of the day was in place for humanity to follow, not for humanity to create. And it may have even landed in their ears as a declaration of war against everything that they held dear. It may have seemed that way. But things are not always as they seem. From the Christ that we are, we can see this beautiful statement, not as a declaration of war, but as a declaration of an all-inclusive love that feeds everyone right where they are with what they need at the time. I don't know if anybody here remembers a sitcom. It didn't last very long. It was in 2018. It lasted 8 episodes. That's not long on television. It was called Living Biblically. I don't know if anybody here remembers that. Well, it's understandable if you don't, because it was like a blip. But it was based on a book by A.J. Jacobs called The Year of Living Biblically. And this is about a guy named Chip whose best friend dies and his wife gets pregnant at the same time, and he goes into this spiritual crisis, like, what does he have to do? What does he have to become to make sure that his baby doesn't die? And he decides that if he cleans up his act, if he lives biblically by literally obeying the Bible to the letter, then everybody around him will be safe. And so he begins his journey by focusing on 2 biblical commandments. And the first one is found in the book of Deuteronomy, which prohibits the wearing of blended fabrics. What you were not allowed to wear was a garment made out of wool and linen. You weren't allowed to blend those fabrics. So he's going to focus on that one. And the other one he's focusing on is found in the book of Leviticus, which calls for adulterers to be put to death by stoning. So by the end of the first episode, this guy is wearing a really ridiculous, all white, all cotton suit. And then what's worse is he picks up a stone and he throws it at a colleague that he believes has committed adultery. It was kind of dumb. But it made a point. Because if all a dogmatic belief does is make us write the right color of fabric or fabric combinations, that's one thing. We're not hurting anybody. But when dogma tells us to pick up a stone and throw it at ourselves or someone else, that's when we know that that dogma is walking us into false belief. That's when we know that that dogma, as stubborn as it may seem to be, is not based on truth, and it must be questioned. As soon as dogma excludes or shames or disqualifies or condemns either us or anyone around us, as soon as dogma picks up a stone and throws it, well, dogma is not serving us. We are serving dogma. Is that what we want? To be walked around by dogma, to serve something that's hurtful? I know you're all probably watching the news, and it does seem that our world stands poised on the brink of war. We're hearing that this is an inevitable path. We're hearing that this is the order of things, and that's that. We don't know what's going to happen. Indeed, the worst may happen. The idea of World War III, well, that may become a reality, but a reality with a small r, not with a big R. Because no matter what happens, there's one thing we know for sure, and that is that in our individual consciousness, we can lead the dogma of war onto a different path, a path of peace. And we do that by walking our thoughts out to the field of consciousness that's beyond right and wrong, beyond man-made rules, beyond tit for tat, and eye for eye and tooth for tooth, and I hit you and you hit me, beyond any dogma that would cause us or those around us needless pain and suffering. We can do that because we're doing it right now. Right now, we're taking the leash of our power of dominion, and we're noticing that leash of our power of dominion. We have that control. And we're taking a collar that's made out of our powers of love and benevolence and imagination, and we're putting that collar on the dogma of war. And right now, we're insisting on walking a different way, no matter how that dogma may pull us and insist that war is the only answer. We can take that dogma and pull it a different way. We can do that because there's no rule or dogma that overrules the love that we are. Would you agree with that? So, would you all please meditate with me and join with me just for 5 minutes as we take our dogma on a walk? If you will close your eyes, and if you will imagine yourselves as 5 years old, and imagine how fully capable you understood yourself to be, and imagine and remember that for you, the world was an unlimited place. Remember how beautifully you asked the question over and over, why? And imagine now that you, as that child, as that 5-year-old child, are given a dog, and the dog's name is War, and that you've been told you need to take that dog for a walk. And so you put on a collar of imagination and love and benevolence. You put on a leash of the power of your dominion. And even though that dog wants to walk in one direction, you remember that because you know you and that dog are one and the same, that you are able, with the love that you are, to walk that dog in a different direction. To walk that dog down the pathway of peace and green pastures and still water. And now I would invite us all to go to Ukraine in our consciousness. And where we find ourselves there, when we find ourselves there, to understand that there are many, many thoughts that need to be taken on a walk. To see all of these thoughts in Ukraine and Russia as thoughts that are like little dogs asking, lead me, take me, show me, take me on a walk. Take as many thoughts as you can. Leash them with the power of love and imagination and benevolence and strength and faith and integrity, benevolence and generosity. Collar them with your power of dominion and show them a different way. A way that is your green pasture, your still water, a place of peace for one and all. Namaste. I think it'd be so nice if we said the prayer for protection together right now. And even if you can't quite remember it, even if you're not entirely sure how to say it with me, all right? Say, the light of God surrounds us. We are the light. The love of God enfolds us. We are the love. The power of God protects us. We are the power. The presence of God watches over us. We are the presence. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And will you sing with me our One Presence affirmation song? I will lead and you will follow.